Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing the portrayal of writers on screen, because there's nothing more meta than writers writing about writers. And first off, though, as of the recording of this episode, the writers of the WGA East, and WGA West are currently on strike. And I've been keeping up with it because I'm aiming to eventually be part of the WGA, and I have people I know who are part of the WGA who are out there picketing, and it's this whole big thing where it's basically what it boils down to is treating people fairly and giving us the respect we deserve as writers. And a big part of it is residuals with streaming, as well as not taking away this job with having AI take over. And a whole big thing with AI is that AI pulls from things that already exists, but studios, they didn't meet the reasonable demands of the writers as part of WGA, where just basically ensuring that that's not going to infringe upon this career. So the future of writing for, like, screenwriting, writing for television and movies. So I'm hopeful that this will of course, eventually come to a reasonable agreement. But as of the recording of this podcast, the strike is still ongoing. The last time there was a major strike was, of course, back in 2007, 2008. From November 07 to February 2008, it lasted for 100 days, that particular strike. And currently as well now, there are a lot of things affected, particularly the thing that was immediate was the late night talk shows halting production. But a lot of these shows, they have halted production, and movies as well. And it's just hopeful, though, seeing that people are all in this together, that without the writers, you don't have anything. If you don't have a script, there's nothing to make, So I'm hopeful that this will have a positive outcome and just secure the profession of screenwriting moving forward, to make it this viable thing of being able to earn a living. Because I've been reading so much about writers struggling to make ends meet, just not having enough job opportunities, because another thing as well was having mini writers' rooms, and also the fact with streaming having fewer episodes, so it being project to project. So there's all these things going into it as part of the strike, as part of what they are aiming to achieve, and why this strike was necessary in the first place. And it just boils down to treat us fairly as human beings and stop it with the corporate greed. Fuck that shit, So all of this to say is that I stand in solidarity with the WGA. So with this episode, I got the idea for this episode actually, ironically enough, or maybe not ironic, I don't know, but when I was rewatching some episodes of Gilmore Girls, what's interesting is that I've watched Gilmore Girls, the show itself, the entirety of it, once. It took me over a year. I think I mentioned that when I discussed the show for its 20th anniversary. But when I've been rewatching some episodes, I more or less forgot the majority of, it's like, almost feels like watching it for the first time. Other than remembering the big key plot points throughout the show, I mostly forgot like a lot of it. So it's as if I'm watching it anew again. But what made me want to talk about writers on screen is because of, in that show, of course, Rory Gilmore, who aspires to be a journalist. And there's a lot of fun portrayals of writers on TV in particular, and the writing process. It's both satirized, but then also, since it's writers writing about their craft, you, for me, empathize with writers on screen, because the whole thing with it is you're putting yourself on the page. You're drawing from your own experiences, things that matter to you. And as I always say at the end of this podcast, write what you love, write what you care about. And for myself personally, I've been pursuing a career, particularly in writing for television, for the past decade now. I've finally been making strides in the sense that now I'm out here in LA, and in terms of networking and stuff, that's still ongoing. But now I am part of a writers group. I owe a lot to my friend who's lived out here for a while now, and I was speaking with her before I first joined the group that I was feeling self-conscious in that I was just like open with her saying, well, I'm basically more or less struggling with imposter syndrome. And my friend was open with me saying, I've been in writers' rooms and I still struggle with that. It's just kind of this ongoing thing. And she said how sometimes you have to let go of your own insecurities more or less and not worry about other people's voices in the room because someone's voice may be louder than yours, but you just have to trust your own writer's voice, like the ideas you're bringing, and everyone's there to help, everyone's there to learn. So, I've learned a lot about my craft over the years and growing as a writer because I still go on with the same struggles more or less of are my ideas good enough or why isn't this where I want it to be. And it really is a process. You have to love the process of writing. It is difficult, but there is so much joy and so much creative freedom in it. Like if you don't love the process, then that's the work of it all, obviously. So it's still an ongoing thing for me of just letting go of my own insecurities. And that's part of just my struggle in life, honestly, of not feeling good enough. Like, my self-esteem issues, truthfully, that's affected my personal life. And that's just trying to get out of my own head and focus on, the love of, in this case, the love of storytelling and the love of, being around people, learning from people and everything like that, whether that's personal or professional too, really. But so like basically getting all of that nonsense, not nonsense, I shouldn't say that, but like all of that noise in your head. It's not nonsense because some of it, like, sure, it's connected to your own fears or just like struggles and everything, but also like it's amplified a lot. Like I realize I'm rambling, pardon me. I'm like just kind of expressing my inner thoughts in this sense, but just because this is all just part of like the struggle of writing. And some of this obviously is amplified all the more for the sake of TV, for the sake of, especially in comedies, just kind of heightening it that much more. But all of that to say is that all of us as humans, we can connect with the fact that we have struggles, we have insecurities, but let's help each other and let's empathize with each other. So overall, though, obviously I love writing. It's my passion, and I'm happy I'm still pursuing it. I'm happy I'm making strides in it. I'm happy I've seen growth as a writer. I love reading people's work, giving them feedback, and I like when people give me feedback. They're able to see things that I hadn't realized about my work, and vice versa. I'm able to give them feedback that hopefully helps them improve. And we all learn from each other, and we just, love the craft. So if you're also a writer looking to break into the business, I'm with you. Keep pushing forward. Keep being persistent. That's what I'm doing. You just got to keep working on your craft. So a big show that I wanted to mention in this episode that I haven't discussed properly yet, because I'll plan on it when this show ends or something, but it's an excellent show. It's won several Emmys, and that is Hacks. It's on HBO Max. They currently have halted production of season 3 due to the writer's strike. I mean, that show is all about showbiz and storytelling and writers and struggling with it and finding your voice and feeling like a has-been in the case of Deborah Vance, and then of course Ava trying to make a name for herself again, and basically the two of them becoming reluctant comedy partners. And the show has spoken to me in so many ways as someone pursuing this industry as well of comedy writing, and it's an absolutely brilliant show. I'll be eager to dive into it more, but a couple of moments particularly, this is one in the second episode of season 1, in fact, when Ava basically complains to Deborah that she's not making the job easy for her, and then Deborah gives her this stern, rude awakening of like this reality of hers, where she says, in regards to the craft, in regards to pursuing this career. She says, good is the minimum. It's the baseline. You have to be so much more than good. And even if you're great and lucky, you still have to work really fucking hard. And even that is not enough. You have to scratch and claw, and it never fucking ends. and it doesn't get better. It just gets harder. So don't complain to me that I'm making your life hard. You don't even know what that means. And it's just like, oof. But the reality of it is, with her career, in Deborah's case of being a stand-up comedian and with Ava being a comedy writer, both of them pursuing this craft, that you have to just love it, even when it's hard, obviously. And of course it's hard. You're going to be scrutinized and criticized. And look at Ava, how she's been outcasted, like ostracized from the whole industry, blacklisted, whatever you want to call it, because of a tweet with an inappropriate joke and everything. So it's like she's desperate for work and this is all she can get. And then Deborah not wanting to just be forgotten just because she's older and more people are having success and everything. So both of them, different generations and everything, yet they are so similar. It's such a brilliant show, my goodness. But just that it's so difficult, but it's so worth it if you love it. And then Ava, later on, I think it's in season 2, when they go on that cruise and Deborah is workshopping her new special she wants to do, and they kind of have found their groove more as writing partners, with Ava writing her jokes and everything. She talks about how basically in other areas of her life she doesn't have a partner at the time, and she's seen as this opportunist and like with this ego and entitled, and she's still just kind of struggling with like, what else do I have in my life? But at least she is working on her craft still. And when Deborah contemplates, because like her old friend had not pursued the same passion as her, like she could have been a great stand-up comedian as well, and then like look at her now, but then she has a grandchild and she's happy and everything. So then Deborah wondering, was that the right path for her? Because she doesn't really she has an okay relationship, I guess that's one way to put it, with her daughter, played by Caitlin Olsen. And Ava then kind of gives Deborah the reality of her situation when Deborah's questioning all of that. And then she says, "Who are you kidding? You can never retire. You're going to be up on that stage until you die. And I'm the same way. I can't turn it off either. And nothing matters more, even if it should." And then Deborah says, "Well, shit, you're right. And I don't want to stop. I like the work. You know, Deborah, back in Vegas, you were on top. But with all due respect, I think that was just a hill. And now you're climbing a mountain." And season 2 ends with Deborah letting Ava go after the success with her latest comedy special. And then people are starting to see Ava again as this young writer with this great voice and this great talent, and people are interested in her again after she's been outcast this whole time. So now she's getting back in and she has a new job opportunity. And that whole speech Deborah gives about people aren't going to want you forever, and then you have to find your own mountain to climb. And then Ava's upset though, saying, wait, this is just going to end. And you know, that's such a heartfelt, sincere moment of Deborah being kind and letting Ava go so that she can see her own success. Such a wonderful scene.
We fucking did it.
We did. We did. So moving forward, I can extend your health insurance 6 months and offer 3 months severance.
Ha ha. Funny. Wait. What? You're not serious?
I am.
You're firing me? Are you fucking kidding? Why? Things are good.
Things are good. And they could keep being good for a very long time. That's the problem. You need to make space for your own work.
Come on. I know what you're doing. You're pushing me away because you're afraid.
Those people, they want you right now. They won't forever. You gotta take advantage of that. You gotta be a shark. You gotta do what's best for you.
I get to decide what's best for me.
You didn't take credit for the special, and you should have. You left that punch-up job early.
I came back for you.
That's my point. And what about that screenplay idea? Have you even started on that? Have you?
Well, I've been busy, and my final draft is corrupted.
And I would keep you busy. It's like you said, I'm gonna keep working until the day I die. Do you know how old you're gonna be when I'm 109?
Please don't make me do math right now. You're the one with all the stories. What do I have to even say?
That's the thing. You gotta go figure it out. I told you. You're just like me. Get your own mountain to climb.
But we're good together. I don't want to be here. I want to be wherever you are.
I gotta get back.
No, wait, whoa, Deborah, that's it? We're not gonna talk anymore? I won't see you?
You'll see me. In court.
The season ends with Deborah dropping the lawsuit, and then she is going her own path, and Ava is going to be going on her own path, starting a new pilot and everything, working on a new series rather. So I look forward to seeing where the show goes next, because it cuts so deeply with the things you basically sacrifice in pursuit of your career, and then wondering if it's all worth it, but then being cutthroat and being persistent and just for the love of the craft and what matters most to you. It's such a fantastic show. Oh my God, I really can't wait to delve into it more. And it's so brilliant. It's so poignant. It's so sharp. It's excellent. Just delving into the psyche of writers, and it's fantastic. So I can't recommend that show enough. But that show has the comedy of it all too, but then also the dramedy, the drama. It's so good. And then like a more satirical take on writing, in particular TV writing, is 30 Rock. I was rewatching some clips of 30 Rock, and it's so funny. Binging it, I had binged it maybe a year or two ago. It's so hilarious, obviously, but when you haven't seen it in a while, and then I just kind of was rewatching some clips, really it is so highly satirical, where it almost, like, it's such a heightened reality where all the characters are like at a 10, and like true parodies of, like with Jenna, I think that's the character's name, the blonde Jenna, of being just this, self-involved actress, and then Tracy Morgan's character, Tracy Jordan, again, like how Liz Lemon, played by Tina Fey, who also created the show, is like parenting them. And then of course the irony by the end of the series when she adopts 2 children who are mini versions of them. Hilarious. And then of course Jack Donaghy, played by Alec Baldwin. And then of course Kenneth the Page. But with Liz, of course, being the head writer of TGS, a parody of SNL. The stress of it all. And then again with her too, of how she has to like answer to all these people, and then she works long hours, but then like her personal life suffers, and then she's trying to come off as more put together, but really she's insecure, and just like all these extremes of this career. And just like, it's so hilarious though, the show, but it really is, when you haven't seen it in a while and rewatch clips, it's just like, wow, this show really is kind of off the charts, but it is so funny. And you got the writer's room, and so just like all of that amplified and parodied of that lifestyle, because obviously drawing from Tina Fey's experience of working on SNL and everything. So it's just so funny. And another more comedic take of writers on the struggle we go through and everything is Nick Miller from New Girl. Nick starts, like, he has all these anger issues, obviously, but first he has that zombie novel, Z is for Zombies. And it's so funny when he is talking to Jess's dad, Bob Day, when they are there for Thanksgiving, and he's talking about his zombie novel with him.
I don't know if Jess has told you this, but I am writing a novel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's it about?
It's about zombies.
Zombies?
And it's a relationship story, and there's a great love story in there that could be made into a movie, I think.
The love story's between
The
whom?
zombie and Carol.
The zombie and the Carol is not a zombie?
No,
she's a regular
she's the
person.
rich girl.
Oh, so it's like the Twilight thing where...
It's not like the Twilight
Where,
no,
the
it isn't.
vampire
You don't
falls in
really
love with
get
a
it.
regular
You don't
person.
get it.
It's the same thing.
Oh, really?
No.
Is there another guy in Twilight that there's a bit of a love triangle with?
Yes. It's the same
Does
as
Twilight have a wolf in it?
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
Is Twilight in Seattle?
Yes.
Well, then whoever wrote that is smart.
And then later when he eventually does finish the first draft and ends up being terrible, but then Winston's like, well, this is the worst thing I've ever read, but at least you finished it, so I'm proud of you. Because obviously showing that he's got ideas and at least he's working on it, working on his novel, but he's got a long way to go as a writer. And it's just, that scene is so hilarious though. Oh my gosh, with Winston reading the first draft of his zombie novel.
Nick, this is the worst thing I have ever read in my entire life. You misspelled the word rhythm 38 times.
Z is for zombie?
Yeah, Z is for
The zombie novel.
Yeah.
Rhythm is a tough word. Don't feel bad about
Thanks,
that.
man. Did you get to the word search? Yeah. I put a word search in the novel. But the joke's on you. There aren't any words in there. So you're just going to be staring at letters, you idiot.
But you know what? You finished it. And for that, my friend, I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I did finish
something.
I finished something.
Read it out loud, Winston. Read it out loud.
Read it out loud.
Okay, I'll read this damn thing. You asked for it.
This might be humiliating.
No one in the sleepy mountain town of Rhythm City
That's Rhythm City.
knew what the meteor meant, but the one thing Mike Jr. did have was a whole lot of rhythms.
Rhythm.
No, yeah.
Whoa, what bit me in the face, Mike Jr. said to his dad, Mike Sr., who sucks.
Yes, Mike Sr. sucks. It's a major theme throughout
And
this.
Mike Sr. sucks a whole bunch, much more than his neighbor Rollo.
Never stop reading
Yes.
this.
Zombie zoo, zombie zoo. Zombie zoo, zombie zoo. Who let them zombies out that damn zombie zoo? Uh-oh, watch your back. Laura, and I guess Laura is another character that he introduces, but that's it.
Just like ridiculous. Obviously just a bunch of nonsense. Like there's a word search, you idiot. I can't. And then like on Laura, like a character he mentions, but then that's it. Like ridiculous. But he later then becomes a successful author when he eventually writes and publishes his book, The Pepperwood Chronicles, toward the end of the series, like in by season 7, then he's a published author. And I mean, with Nick, it's like you don't really at first take him seriously as a writer, and that's kind of a struggle too of when is this a hobby, so to speak, and when is this going to be something like I get paid for? Like the goal hopefully is to get published, to sell a script and everything. So for Nick, like he's got a long way to go in that sense, but he eventually does see success as a writer. And it's heightened too with Nick when he says things like by the last season when he says stuff like, we as writers, like we just like, let me hate everything I write and everything I've ever created, like all like kind of the self-loathing that goes with it at some points when you're just kind of, for me, I've experienced this as well, where like I'm sick of my own writing, I'm sick of this same project, whatever it may be, I'm sick of reading the same dialogue over and over, I'm sick of the characters, I'm just like, oh, I want this to be better than what it is. But with each iteration of any draft, it's just kind of focusing more and more of, well, what's the truth of it? What can I take away from it? What is it I'm trying to say? So kind of refining it in that sense. And so first just getting it out on the page, even if it's terrible, and then working your way up from there. So like kudos to Nick that he does eventually see success, but it takes him a while, but he eventually gets there. I love also when Cece and Schmidt are getting married, and then Nick, when Schmidt had lost his vows, and then Nick's going to help him rewrite his vows, and then he's saying, okay, well, we got to talk about all the stories in life. It's like all like the 7 stories. It's divorced woman finding herself, zombie, whatever he says, like all this something, dogs, or like wars, like all this like weird stuff from Nick. And like his like views on writing, like as writers, we write, we don't read, like all this ridiculous stuff. And when he was working on his next draft for the Pepperwood Chronicles, and when he goes crazy when Schmidt, like when everyone had read it and then saying it's actually really good, and he's like, no notes, Nick, and then Nick's going crazy like, no notes, and he's just like writing that over and over and trying to be like, how do I, like, what am I supposed to do with that, So crazy struggles with Nick, but it's all good that it works out for him. I like all that because it is so, like, when you're really in it, that's the thing with writing too. I've learned as well, like as I'm learning too, that sometimes you do have to like push through, even if like you're not feeling inspired. Like at least let me get it down on the page, and then I can rework it. It's okay if it's crap, this first draft. The important thing is it's here on the page. I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to rework it. It's okay if I don't know what this is yet. It's okay if I don't know what I'm trying to say yet. It's okay if I just have whatever the one thing is that I'm like, at least I have this character to work with, or at least I have this plot point. Because again, it is a process. So it could take a long time, but eventually you'll get there. And it's another show, of course, that you know how much I love this show. It's BoJack Horseman, that kind of parodies the struggles of writing so beautifully, so realistically, and hilariously too. But case in point, in season 1, when BoJack is trying to write his memoir, and of course he does anything but write. You know, he's going to have any other way to procrastinate. That whole sequence is hilarious.
All right, let's get to work. Ugh. I feel like we can beat this font. Ah, copper plate. A font for the truly modern man. Ha! No. There you are, Verdana. Oh, Comic Sans, you drunk. Go home. 310! I just spent 6 hours playing with fonts? Holy shit!
Playing with the fonts, any excuse to not actually sit down and write. That's something I've struggled with as well, of just kind of having writer's block. In my case, it's been a lot of thinking I don't have good ideas, or thinking, oh, I want to write a great novel, but if only I had a great idea for it. And what helps is just kind of a stream of consciousness of just, let me just write literally anything and just see what kind of small idea comes of it. Or when you're not trying to come up with an idea, is usually when you come up with great ideas, whether you're in the shower, whether you're just on a walk, whether you're doing some menial thing. That's when all of a sudden your brain, like, you can go to creative places without realizing it. Because for me as well, I've had ideas where I'm just like, okay, well, there's something, there's like a small idea, but can this turn into something bigger? Well, I don't know unless I pursue it, unless I explore it more. So again, like the whole process of writing, like of not procrastinating, because procrastination for me, I've realized it comes from a lot of places. It can come from fear of, oh, my ideas aren't good enough, but then like you don't want to use that as an excuse of like, oh, this is such a bad draft. Well, that's okay, you can rework it. You know that yes, it takes time, but it's worth it if you just keep pursuing it. So that's something I've just been trying to push myself with, of it's okay if it's bad. It's okay if it's going to take longer than you would like. Just get it down on the page. So a lot of that too with writer's block, again, is like not being prepared. Like if you're just going to sit down to a blank page, like let me just write an amazing idea, of like having high expectations basically. When you're writing a draft especially, you have to go into it with the mindset of this is going to change. This isn't going to be an amazing draft. If you basically lower your expectations and give yourself the freedom to explore and not be like, okay, this needs to be so amazing right off the bat, whatever. It's going to take time. That's the whole thing. And if you sit down and try to just come from nothing, that's going to make it that much more difficult. You have to start from somewhere. And what I've realized, if you try to skip a step, honestly, like if you try to just jump into like writing a draft without an outline, it's going to be that much more difficult. You need to start somewhere of, okay, let me at least try to work out some characters. Let me at least try to create a scenario. That's usually what I've been doing. Think of the characters first, then the plot comes, and then just kind of figuring out the relationships of the characters, the world of it. All this other stuff will fall into place. But if you try to, for me, if you try to, like what I've learned, skipping a step, just trying to go to the draft without having an outline, that's going to make it all the more difficult. That's going to be where you're going to have to like rework it that much more. And that's a big thing in Seinfeld, in fact, when George and Jerry are trying to write the pilot, their NBC pilot, and they just sit down and try to write and then immediately get distracted and everything, talking about the pens, talking about, okay, like what are we going to write, without having an outline in mind and like without really trying to, like, let's take it one step at a time. That's what makes it difficult. But again, it's just parodied so well. It's just like the struggle of, okay, like let's get some ideas onto the page. And of course, it's just, nope, let's end up watching TV.
Bix? What'd you get, Bix?
What, you got a problem with the pen now?
They're like a rolling writer. They're very smooth.
All right, let's just get to work. NBC pilot, Seinfeld project, Act 1, Scene A.
So you're gonna sit there?
Let me explain to you one of the key elements involved in the writing process. Because it may seem outwardly that the pen and the paper and the chair play a large role, but they're all somewhat incidental to the actual using of the brain. Okay, so just park yourself. All right, Act 1, Scene A.
Drink?
No drink.
All right, here we go.
Act 1, Scene A.
Weren't you supposed to call Elaine?
Yes.
You know, any excuse to just, no, it's like, we'll work on it later, you know? And then, of course, George eventually comes up with the idea of having, you know, the judge orders him to be my butler, you know, because the whole thing with that pilot is that they have the premise of it's about nothing. But then even nothing, you have to have something. You have to have a story, you have to have characters, even though he's just like, nope, no story. It's like, I woke up, I came to work. There you go, that's a story. Well, no, it's not. Because, you know, it's not how storytelling works. Something has to happen. You have to have conflict, you have to have characters, so there you go. But eventually it works out for them. Actually, ironically, it doesn't then by the end, you know, with the series finale, with the show. They were going to have all that success, only to end up in jail. Good God. You know, Seinfeld is brilliant, obviously. I've talked about Seinfeld, too, one of my all-time favorite shows. But going back to BoJack Horseman, too, because with BoJack then having that struggle with writing, it's all the more realistic, too, when we see Diane trying to write her book and using her damage, as she calls it, like it's this good damage, the damage that I've experienced in my life, my trauma and everything, to channel that into something creative. And that whole episode, Good Damage, in the final season of the show, season 6, when she's having that stream of consciousness and it's all like those scribbles and drawings in her mind and talking about, you know, feeling isolated growing up and feeling like her family doesn't get her and her struggles with her marriage, and that eventually fell apart to Mr. Peanut Butter, and her depression. And then she ends up, when she's at the mall, just writing random thoughts about this girl detective, and then like just sending that, and that turned out to be a book. But first her thinking like, what was all this damage for? And that whole scene when she talks about that openly with Princess Carolyn is so brilliant, and that relationship to me is so underrated, that friendship, because Diane basically grappling with, then what was all this for? And then her basically, again, a struggle for her of fetishizing, I can't say that word, fetishizing her own sadness as she had struggled with her own trauma, and basically saying, I could have just been happy this whole time. And then Princess Carolyn telling her that, well, this book is something that can connect. And if that's what led to you, like all of that leading to this book, then that is something that's worth it. So then write this book instead. So that whole scene is absolutely beautiful.
Princess Carolyn! Princess Carolyn, wait! I understand. You're trying to be helpful in your own pushy, self-absorbed way.
Oh, thank you.
But I don't want to write a middle-grade fiction detective series.
I think you do, though. Because when I was reading it, I could tell you were having fun.
Yeah, but I'm not writing a book to have fun. If I don't write my book of essays now, I never will.
So, don't write your book of essays.
I have to.
Why?
Because if I don't, that means that all the damage I got isn't good damage. It's just damage. I have gotten nothing out of it, and all those years I was miserable was for nothing. I could have been happy this whole time, and written books about girl detectives, and been cheerful, and popular, and had good parents. Is that what you're saying? What was it all for?
I don't know, Diane. All I know is that this book about the girl detective is fun. I liked it. I like thinking that my daughter could grow up in a world with books like that. Or if my daughter's not a reader, a lucrative film adaptation.
When I was a little girl, I thought that everything, all the abuse and neglect, it somehow made me special. And I decided that one day I would write something that would make little girls like me feel less alone. And if I can't write that book...
Then maybe write this other book. Maybe this book does that too.
Yeah?
I'm like realizing I gotta rewatch BoJack Horseman. It's been a while, but then later when she realizes that her eventual stepson, Sonny, had connected with the books and like the book that she had written, it doesn't have to be like this gritty, depressing, whatever it is that she thought she wanted to write, that she thought she had to write. Like when you let go of all that and just let your mind truly, and in her case, like when she just randomly was at the ball, so she saw inspiration in that way, and then look what it led to, this great book. And it's so funny too later when Mr. Peanut Butter when he had just written a memoir or whatever. And then he's like, writing is so easy. Literally anyone can do it. It's like, oh God, yep, haven't heard that one before. Hilarious. So just basically the struggle of all that, not let that go to waste. Like it was all for nothing, as Diane had struggled with. That, no, it's all part of growing. It doesn't mean what you have to focus on, basically. Like allowing all yourself to breathe and like find the joy and beauty of writing, and like the true joy in her case of writing this great book. So I just love all that. I think it's fantastic. And there's another great show that I've been watching, I'm almost done with it now, that portrays acting and the pursuit of acting and the Hollywood life and writing and all of that stuff. Basically just Hollywood, like, because similar to BoJack Horseman, of that lifestyle so brilliantly, is Party Down. Such a fantastic show with Adam Scott as Henry Pollard and Ken Marino as Ron, and such a hilarious show. And oh my God, it's so brilliant. It's one of the few shows where, because like then there was a revival season that just came out recently, and I had heard of the show, and then I finally was watching for the first time the older seasons 1 and 2, before the show was canceled and then revived now for a season 3. It was just a few episodes. Hopefully there'll be more at some point. But it's one of the few shows where the revival of it, like, though obviously there's a time jump, it's been 11, 12 years, however long it's been, and like the people look older and stuff, but the essence of the show and the writing, it just has this seamless transition of falling right back into it and being as sharp and as smart as ever. All the things like they're making fun of and parodying and everything, because there's of course struggling actors, and then as these caterers, and then also Roman, who is a struggling writer, and then claiming people are hacks and sellouts, and his old writing partner. And it's, oh my God, it's such a hilarious show. Like poor Ron is like such a loser, like can never get a win. And then Henry, who had left the business, struggling this whole time, but then still thinking this catering job is beneath him. And then the on and off thing with Casey, played by Lizzie Kaplan, where by the end of the original run of the series, by the end of season 2, when her part gets cut from the Judd Apatow movie, and then she's really upset, and then she's like, don't give me that bullshit, Henry, that you think I can make it and everything, because you gave up on yourself, so how are you to expect me to believe you that I shouldn't give up on myself, or whatever, him trying to cheer her up. But she's so sick of trying to pursue this and nothing working out. And then at the end, he has that small victory of him going back and trying to pursue acting again, going on an audition. And then meanwhile, he'll fast forward then in the present, when we find out he is an English teacher and getting a divorce and all that stuff. And then also Kyle, then it's such a great show. I'm just recapping now. I don't mean to be doing that, but it's a hilarious, hilarious show, and so brilliant with its meta commentary about pursuing that career and just getting crushed, but then like if you love the craft, you just got to keep at it. So it's just so hilarious though. And another great show that unfortunately was canceled after only 1 season, but again, so meta, and I really loved it, and I really wanted to see more, but unfortunately it was canceled, is the series Reboot. Only 1 season on Hulu, created by the co-creator of Modern Family, Steve Levitan, about an old sitcom that they reboot. And then you got the writer, who turns out her father was the original creator. So then with them, like, they had loved her script, but then like this guy, the original showrunner. So it's a great show, a show about a show. And then of course you got the writer's room, which was by far my favorite scenes from the show, because it's just, a little taste of being in a comedy writer's room. And then they had the young writers and the old writers, and it's just so good. And there's such a great quote from the character played by Rose Abdu, who was Gypsy on Gilmore Girls. I think her character's name is Selma in this show. And there's an episode where one of the actors, what was her name on the show? Well, she's played by Judy Greer. Oh, Bree was the character's name. When she just wants to sit in on the writer's room, and then basically just not getting how it works, like just kind of like imposing all of her stuff on it, but not like trusting the process and being vulnerable, and instead trying to like show that she's smart and everything. And then Rose Abdoo's character as one of the, like, you know, a female writer having grown in this industry for years and years. Another just fantastic quote where she says, "When I first started back in the 70s, I was the only woman in the room. Just me and a bunch of chain-smoking neurotic chauvinists, who, by the way, also smelled like herring. Some of them resented a woman being there, but I loved the work. So I said, fuck 'em. And I outpitched, outjoked every last one of them. My point is, the writer's room, it's a sacred place. If you want to be accepted there, you gotta cut the vanity shit. Roll up your sleeves, pinch your nose, and learn to be so goddamn funny that everyone takes you seriously." So again, it's just like, you gotta put yourself out there, you have to love what you do, you have to not give up, and just keep pushing forward. So, you know, all that to say is that if you love something, keep at it. Eventually you'll get there. So again, I'm hopeful moving forward that I'm making strides. I already know I've come a long way as a writer, but I'm just keeping at it, keep pursuing what I love, and eventually I'll get to where I want to be. So I love how writers are portrayed on screen, because it's writers from their own experience about the ups and downs of the writing process, about being vulnerable, about that creative spark, the love of storytelling, and then also the struggles of the process, that it's so much writing and rewriting and retooling and breaking stories and pitching, and it's so much, but if you love it, you'll do it, and you keep doing it because you love it. So, you know, I could talk about my love of writing for hours on end, but the important thing, as always with anything, is to never give up, keep going, and that's what I'm continuing to do. So writers, write on. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Check out storytellingsaga.com, and as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next episode, I'm so excited to say that I will be interviewing animator, writer, and director Jay Lender. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.